The room didn't just go quiet. It collapsed into stunned silence. Because what was supposed to be a routine conversation about music, legacy, and industry history suddenly twisted into something no one in that room was prepared for. One name was mentioned, then another, and before anyone could redirect the moment, the atmosphere had already shifted. According to multiple people who claim they witnessed the exchange, rapper DaBrat allegedly made a comment that instantly set off a chain reaction involving the Braxtons and longtime music mogul Birdman. At first, it sounded like casual industry talk. Then the sentence landed. And suddenly the room felt like it had been hit with a shockwave. Sources say the moment referenced a confusing, long-whispered timeline involving Braxton, Toni Braxton, and Birdman, something fans have speculated about for years, but never fully understood. Within minutes, phones were out. Clips were spreading. People in the room were texting friends, managers, bloggers, anyone who might already be watching social media explode in real time. Because the internet has always been obsessed with one question. What really happened behind the scenes between the Braxton sisters and Birdman? The rumors have floated around for years. Awkward moments at events. Old interviews that suddenly feel different when replayed. Fans pointing out tiny details no one noticed the first time. But according to insiders, the comment that night pushed those whispers into the open in a way no one expected. And when someone in the room mentioned the past out loud, witnesses say Toni Braxton became visibly emotional. Not staged tears. Not reality TV drama. The kind of quiet, overwhelmed reaction that instantly makes everyone else stop talking. Meanwhile, the internet was already detonating. Old clips resurfaced. Fans started connecting timelines. Bloggers claimed there were private messages, backstage arguments, and even a heated confrontation after the moment went viral. And the wildest rumor of all, that there may be a recording from that night, one that could reveal exactly what was said when the cameras stopped rolling. If that recording exists, this story could become the most explosive chapter in Braxton family history. Because once old industry rumors start colliding with real emotions, someone's version of the past is bound to fall apart. The moment that comment landed, people in the room reportedly stopped breathing. At first, it didn't even sound dramatic. It sounded like one of those casual industry remarks that float through conversations when musicians start trading old stories. But according to multiple insiders, when DaBrat mentioned the timeline involving Birdman and the Braxtons, something in the room shifted immediately. People looked at each other. Some laughed nervously. Others leaned forward as if they had just realized the conversation was about to go somewhere very uncomfortable. And then someone quietly said a sentence that insiders claim changed the energy of the entire room. "You'll know that timeline never made sense." That was all it took. Because for years, fans have tried to piece together the complicated public story involving Toni Braxton, her long-rumored relationship with Birdman, and the strangely familiar dynamic that Braxton sometimes appeared to have with him in public. Back when it first happened, most viewers brushed it off as harmless. Tama is known for being affectionate, dramatic, playful, over the top. That's part of her personality. But years later, when people started replaying old footage, certain moments suddenly felt different. Especially the infamous concert moment where Tama hovered close to Birdman, dabbing sweat from his face and moving with a level of familiarity that confused viewers watching at home. At the time, critics called it awkward. Some called it disrespectful. But others insisted it was simply Tama being Tama. That moment faded into the background, until now. Because once the timeline was mentioned again, social media immediately started pulling those old clips back into the spotlight. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Fans were asking questions they had asked years earlier, but now with far more intensity. Why did Tamar look so comfortable around Birdman? Why did some of the sisters look uncomfortable watching it happen? And most importantly, why did no one ever clearly explain what the dynamic actually was? Inside the room where the conversation allegedly started, witnesses say the tension was becoming impossible to ignore. Someone reportedly joked about how the internet was going to run wild with this. But the laughter didn't last long. Because according to multiple accounts, the conversation quickly turned serious when Toni Braxton appeared visibly emotional. At first, she reportedly stayed quiet. Listening. Watching. Processing. Then one insider claims Toni quietly asked a question that instantly deepened the tension. Why bring that up now? It wasn't an angry question. It was something closer to exhaustion. The kind of reaction that suggests a topic has been revisited too many times behind closed doors already. That single moment reportedly triggered whispers around the room. People started speculating that the comment from DaBrat might have touched on something the family had deliberately kept out of public conversations for years. Because families, especially famous ones, often have agreements about what stays private and what gets shared with the world. Meanwhile, outside that room, the internet had already begun its own investigation. Fans pulled up archived interviews, old red carpet footage, reality show scenes from Braxton family values. In those clips, viewers started noticing tiny details they had missed before. Glances, pauses, moments where the sisters seemed to react subtly whenever Birdman was mentioned. None of those moments proved anything. But they added fuel to a conversation that was already growing louder by the minute. Then came the first big twist. An anonymous entertainment blogger claimed someone from the event had shared a short audio clip from backstage. The clip allegedly captured a heated conversation between several people shortly after the comment about the timeline was made. The audio itself hasn't been verified. But according to people who claim to have heard it, one voice can be heard saying, "You shouldn't have said that here." Another voice reportedly responds, "It's already public. People just pretend it's not." Those lines alone were enough to send social media into overdrive. Because if the audio is real, it suggests the conversation wasn't just harmless industry gossip. It was something far more sensitive. Meanwhile, fans began debating a different question entirely. What role did Birdman play in all of this? For someone whose name is central to the story, Birdman has been remarkably quiet throughout the years. No timeline clarifications. No interviews addressing the speculation. Just silence. And silence in celebrity culture is rarely neutral. Some fans believe that silence means there's nothing to clarify. Others believe it means there's far more to the story than anyone has publicly admitted. As the hours passed, the online conversation became even more chaotic. Fans started splitting into camps. Some argued that bringing up old rumors about relationships was unfair and invasive. Others insisted that if something had affected family dynamics in the past, it was inevitable that the truth would eventually come out. Meanwhile, insiders claim the Braxton sisters themselves were already dealing with the fallout privately. Phones were ringing. Messages were flying. And according to one source familiar with the situation, emotions were running extremely high. Because when family history becomes public discussion, it's never just about the facts. It's about loyalty, trust, and the fear that old wounds might reopen in front of millions of strangers. But the most unsettling development came later that night. A second anonymous account claimed there might be longer audio recordings from backstage, recordings that allegedly capture a much more intense conversation between members of the group after the original comment went viral. Those recordings have not surfaced publicly yet, but the possibility alone has fans on edge. Because if that audio ever leaks, it could reveal exactly what was said when the cameras stopped rolling. And if that happens, the story everyone thinks they understand right now might turn out to be only half of what really happened. The situation didn't cool down overnight. It intensified. By the next morning, the internet had already turned the moment into a full-scale investigation, and every tiny detail connected to Toni Braxton, Tamar Braxton, and Birdman was being dissected like evidence in a courtroom. Clips resurfaced from old interviews. Moments from Braxton family values began trending again. And suddenly, scenes that once looked like harmless reality TV drama were being re-examined through a completely different lens. Fans began noticing something strange. Whenever Birdman's name came up in older footage, the energy between the sisters sometimes shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that viewers now felt something deeper may have been happening behind the scenes. One scene in particular began circulating everywhere. In the clip, Tamar jokingly teases her sister about relationships, while the other sisters exchange glances that last just a little too long. At the time, the moment looked playful. Now, thousands of fans were slowing the footage down frame by frame, convinced those glances carried hidden meaning. Of course, none of it confirmed anything. But speculation doesn't require proof. It only requires momentum. Meanwhile, the alleged backstage audio continued spreading in private group chats. The version circulating online was still short and difficult to verify, but according to multiple entertainment bloggers, the conversation captured in the clip sounded tense. One voice, possibly female, could be heard saying, "We agreed we weren't going to revisit that." Another voice reportedly responded, "People keep asking because it never made sense." Those lines alone sent fans into a frenzy. Because if they were authentic, they suggested the timeline confusion fans had debated for years may have been something the people involved had also struggled to navigate privately. And that realization changed how the entire situation felt. Instead of random gossip, the story began to look like a family issue that had quietly existed for years, but was never meant to be public discussion. Inside the entertainment industry, rumors like this aren't uncommon. Artists date. Friendships evolve. Relationships overlap. But when those dynamics involve siblings, or families whose personal lives have been shared with the world, the emotional stakes become far more complicated. Sources familiar with the Braxton circle say the sisters have always been fiercely protective of each other when outside criticism appears. But behind closed doors, like many families, disagreements can still happen. And sometimes those disagreements involve deeply personal subjects. That's why insiders say the moment involving DaBrat caught everyone off guard. Not because she intended to create drama, but because the comment reportedly referenced something people in the room may have already understood in their own ways. Once it was said publicly, even in a semi-private setting, the conversation couldn't be pulled back. Meanwhile, fans were asking an entirely different question. Why had Birdman never addressed the speculation over the years? His relationship with Toni Braxton had been public knowledge for a long time. There were interviews, red carpet appearances, moments where they spoke openly about their connection. But the timeline that fans were now debating had never been clarified. Not once. For some observers, that silence now felt suspicious. For others, it simply meant the rumors had never been important enough to respond to. But the internet rarely agrees on anything. Some fans argued the story was being blown out of proportion by gossip culture. Others insisted the resurfacing clips and alleged audio proved there was more history than people realized. Celebrity commentators began weighing in too. A few industry insiders posted cryptic messages about how music history is messier than people think. One entertainment podcast host said situations like this often happen when personal relationships and professional circles overlap for years without clear boundaries. Those comments only fueled the debate further. Because the deeper fans dug into old interviews and footage, the more they realized something important. There had never been a single clear explanation for how certain relationships in the story began, or when. And when timelines feel incomplete, people start trying to fill in the blanks themselves. Meanwhile, insiders claim the Braxton family was dealing with the situation privately. Phones were ringing constantly. Friends, managers, and relatives were reportedly reaching out to check on everyone involved. Because regardless of what rumors say, the Braxtons are still a family first. And families don't enjoy watching their private history become viral conversation. According to one source familiar with the situation, the sisters were especially concerned about how quickly the story had grown beyond the original moment. What began as a comment in a room had now become a trending topic across multiple platforms. And that meant millions of people were forming opinions based on incomplete information. But the situation took another unexpected turn late that evening. A well-known entertainment journalist posted a cryptic message on social media. Some stories stay quiet for years because everyone involved agreed to leave them there. The post didn't name anyone directly, but fans immediately connected it to the Braxton conversation. The implication was chilling. If certain details had remained quiet for years, it might not have been because they weren't true. It might have been because the people involved had chosen not to revisit them publicly. And that idea changed the tone of the entire debate. Because suddenly the question wasn't just about who dated who or when. It was about why the subject had remained unresolved in public conversations for so long. But just when it seemed like the speculation couldn't grow any bigger, another rumor started circulating, one that made the situation even more explosive. According to a blogger who claimed to have spoken with someone close to the event, there might be video footage from backstage that shows the conversation after the comment was made. The footage hasn't appeared online. No screenshots have been verified. But if it exists, it could show exactly how everyone in the room reacted when the subject was brought up. And that possibility has fans watching the situation even more closely. Because if that video ever leaks, the public might finally see what really happened in the moments after the comment that started everything. By the time the third wave of the story arrived, the internet had already turned what began as a simple comment into one of the most dissected celebrity conversations of the year. At that point, the situation was no longer about a single moment involving DaBrat, the Braxtons, and Birdman. It had become something else entirely. A debate about history. A debate about perception. And most of all, a debate about how easily the internet can rewrite a story once speculation starts moving faster than facts. For days, fans had been replaying old clips involving Tamar Braxton and Toni Braxton, trying to determine whether the public had misunderstood their dynamic with Birdman all along. Some viewers believed the entire situation had been exaggerated by gossip culture. Others believed the resurfaced footage, an alleged backstage audio hinted at a deeper story the public had never fully seen. But the most interesting development during this stage wasn't another rumor. It was silence. One by one, the people connected to the story stopped speaking publicly. No statements. No interviews. No social media clarifications. Just quiet. For fans who had been following the situation closely, that silence felt almost louder than the original comment that started everything. Because in celebrity culture, silence can mean many things. Sometimes it means there is nothing to address. Other times it means the situation is being handled privately, far away from the chaos of social media. And sometimes it means everyone involved understands that continuing the conversation publicly would only make things worse. Meanwhile, the internet refused to let the story fade. Entertainment bloggers continued posting theories about what might have happened behind the scenes. Old footage from Braxton family values kept resurfacing, with fans analyzing every facial expression and every line of dialogue as if it contained hidden clues. But the deeper people looked, the more complicated the story appeared. Because relationships, especially ones that develop inside tight industry circles, rarely follow clean timelines. Artists collaborate. Friendships evolve. People meet through the same networks again and again over the course of decades. And sometimes the public only sees fragments of those connections long after the relationships themselves have changed. According to one longtime music industry insider, who commented anonymously on the situation, stories like this often grow because the public only sees small pieces of a much larger puzzle. He explained that the music industry has always been filled with overlapping friendships and relationships that evolve over time. When those histories involve famous families like the Braxtons, fans naturally become curious about every detail. But curiosity can quickly turn into assumption. An assumption can turn into narrative. That narrative, whether accurate or not, had now taken on a life of its own. Meanwhile, one small development quietly added another layer to the story. Fans noticed that Toni Braxton had removed an older social media photo featuring Birdman from her profile. The deletion wasn't announced. It wasn't explained. But it didn't go unnoticed. Within minutes, screenshots began circulating across platforms, with people debating whether the removal meant anything at all. Some fans believed it was a simple attempt to avoid fueling the rumor. Others believed it hinted at tension behind the scenes. But without a statement, no one could know for sure. And once again, speculation filled the space where facts were missing. Meanwhile, the rumored backstage video still had not appeared. The alleged longer audio recording remained unverified. And no journalist had confirmed any of the more dramatic claims circulating online. That lack of confirmation began to slow the frenzy slightly. Because even the internet eventually reaches a point where rumors stop producing new developments. But the story still left something behind. It reminded fans of how complicated public narratives can become when celebrity relationships intersect with family dynamics. The Braxton sisters have always been known for sharing their lives openly with fans. Their reality show gave viewers an inside look at their disagreements, reconciliations, and emotional moments. But even the most transparent public figures still have parts of their lives that remain private. And when those private histories become the subject of viral speculation, the line between curiosity and intrusion becomes difficult to navigate. For Tama and Toni in particular, the situation seemed to highlight how easily public perception can shift. One resurfaced comment. A few old clips. A rumor about backstage audio. And suddenly years of relationships were being re-examined through a completely different lens. In reality, none of the key questions the internet had been debating were ever answered. Did the comment mean what fans thought it meant? Was there truly a complicated timeline behind the relationships people were discussing? Or had the internet simply taken a moment out of context and built an entire story around it? Without confirmation from the people involved, those questions remain unresolved. And that may be the most important lesson from the entire situation. Because the internet loves conclusions. But real life rarely provides them on demand. What remains now is a reminder of how quickly celebrity narratives can evolve, and how easily speculation can turn into something that feels like fact. The moment that sparked the entire conversation lasted only seconds. Yet its ripple effects spread across millions of screens. And even though the online frenzy has begun to fade, the story has already become part of the larger conversation about celebrity culture, privacy, and the power of viral speculation. In the end, the situation may not be remembered for the rumor itself. It may be remembered as a moment that showed how quickly a single comment can reopen questions the public never fully understood in the first place. And until someone involved decides